What is up, everybody? My name is Jerichoholic8704, here with something a little different. A little different for my channel, not different for YouTube standards, because these tier list videos are everywhere. Type in tier list, and I guarantee you're going to get pages upon pages of results. So I figured, instead of being creative, original, forging my own path on this website, I figured why not just be a conformist, follow the pack, follow the buzzards in this case, and just make my own. So that's what we're doing. We're doing a WrestleMania tier list video. Now, I probably should have done this around WrestleMania time, but I figured, I had this idea when I was driving to work, and I was like, ooh, I have a great idea. And I couldn't wait. So we're just doing it now. So very self-explanatory video. We're just going to be ranking the WrestleManias. I don't intend on putting them in any specific order other than their tiers, but I can give you a little breakdown here. S I define as one of the best manias of all time. A is a great show. B is a good show with more good than bad. C would be an average show with more bad than good. D would be a bad WrestleMania, and F would be pretty much the bottom of the barrel worst WrestleManias of all time. So let's start with an example for each tier. So an example of an F tier WrestleMania, I'll give it to, WrestleMania 9 is pretty F tier worthy. It had a cool aesthetic. I liked, wrestling out in the sun in Las Vegas, the Caesar's Palace thing. But overall, match-wise, this pay-per-view sucked. Undertaker Giant Gonzalez is one of the worst WrestleMania matches of all time. Mr. Perfect and Lex Luger should have been a really great match, but it wasn't all that good at all. Brett and Yoko actually had a decent main event, but then the whole, the shitty stuff with Hogan, just left a black eye on this pay-per-view, which is very apropos considering Hulk Hogan had a black eye. And I know there's 10 million urban legends as to how that got there, but still, this Mania is bottom of the barrel, not a good show at all. So a D tier WrestleMania, I'll give that to WrestleMania 5. So the thing about WrestleMania 5 is it has a really good main event with Hogan and Savage. And a good main event can, save a show, a bad main event can break a show. And I will say, while I do enjoy the main event and while it was well built up, I think it's the only redeeming quality of this show, because honestly, I really can't tell you anything else from WrestleMania 5. It's just not noteworthy at all. And this was the era of WrestleManias where it really was built around your main events. And again, this main event was built up very well, so I can commend WrestleMania 5 for that. But overall, it's just not a memorable show at all. So C tier, I'll give it to WrestleMania 1. This show really isn't amazing. WrestleMania 1 has a lot of just charm to it as it's the first WrestleMania. I compare WrestleMania 1 a lot to the original Super Mario Brothers. We've had so many advancements and so many better iterations of Mario that going back and playing the original Super Mario Brothers, it's cool, it's good, but you don't play it for the sake of oh my god, this is a great game. You play it because it's I want to get a little bit of a history lesson, or I want to experience this piece of history. And that's kind of what WrestleMania 1 is. It's cool when you're going back and looking at it from that lens, but if you want to see a great wrestling show, or even just a good WWE, pomp and circumstance kind of show, WrestleMania 1 really isn't it. But it is, in a way, because it's just historic. So I do enjoy myself some WrestleMania 1, but, again, not the best. So a B tier WrestleMania, I'd say that would be something maybe WrestleMania 22. This is a good WrestleMania. Again, I think it's a little underwhelming. The main events aren't super great. The world title triple threat's a little short. John Cena, Triple H is okay, but it does have a lot of good stuff. I liked Shawn Michaels and Vince McMahon, even though, again, we probably could have had a better Shawn Michaels match, but he still, gave a full effort. Edge and Mick Foley, a really, really fun match. I liked Money in the Bank. That was good. So overall, I think WrestleMania 22 has a lot going for it. I liked the big time theme. I liked it being in Chicago. Just a lot of great things about this show. So I'll give WrestleMania 22 a solid thumbs up. All right, so an A tier WrestleMania, I'd say this is something like WrestleMania 7. Really underrated WrestleMania here. One of my favorite classic manias. I really love the main event, and I love the build-up, even though today it is not the most politically correct storyline, but I still find a lot of enjoyment out of it. And I really like the opener with the Rockers versus Haku and Barbarian, and it has one of my favorite matches of all time with Ultimate Warrior and Randy Savage. absolute classic match with a classic moment of Miss Elizabeth and Randy Savage reuniting. So good stuff there. And an S tier WrestleMania would be something like WrestleMania 17. Widely regarded as one of the greatest, if not the greatest WrestleMania of all time. And there's very little reason to argue against that. This show is a perfect way to cap off the Attitude Era, like one of the most prominent times in the company's history. And I mean, it had something for everyone. You had a really solid undercard. It isn't like super great, but it's a solid WrestleMania undercard. But then once you get Benoit and Angle, the show just goes into a whole other gear. TLC 2, Undertaker, Triple H, Rock and Austin. These are great matches, great WrestleMania matches. So, overall, WrestleMania 17, it's a great show from top to bottom and one of the best in company history. So there's like a prime example of what we're looking at tier-wise. So let's just kind of dive right in. They're kind of jumbled up, so we'll just kind of go as we go along. We'll start with WrestleMania 35. I'll give this a B, just because I really did enjoy WrestleMania 35 this year. I think the only issue I had with this show is its length. Like, I thought it was a solid WrestleMania card. It just seemed to go on forever and ever and ever. And, I liked Kofi and Bryan. It was my favorite match of the night. I thought the women's triple threat was not the greatest match in the world, but I think it was still solid. Like, honestly, I thought the Royal Rumble women's title matches were better than the triple threat here. And I mean, even the Ronda-Charlotte match from Survivor Series, that was awesome. It was better than the triple threat, but it was still good. I just think the length was the issue. And while I'm talking about length, ever since WrestleMania 32, we've had these really, really long WrestleManias. And because of that, I'm going to put, and I don't know if this is a hot take or not, but I'm going to put 32, 33, and 34 in C tier. It's not that I dislike these shows. I just find them underwhelming. I just don't find a lot to enjoy with them. 32, I just think, was flanked with bad booking decisions and disappointing matches like the main event and Lesnar and Ambrose. 33, I just thought had an underwhelming card. It had some cool moments. I liked Goldberg and Lesnar. I liked the Hardy Boys returning. But other than that, a lot of the matches really weren't all that great. I really didn't care too much about Shane and AJ. I thought the WWE title match sucked. I thought the main event really wasn't all that exciting either. And WrestleMania 34 had a really great start, but then it fell off a cliff. After the first 4 matches, I was like, we're going to have one of the best Manias ever, because I expected AJ and Nakamura to have, Wrestle Kingdom 10 2.0, and I figured Lesnar and Reigns would have WrestleMania 31 2.0, but they really didn't. Both of those matches kind of fell flat, and I just didn't think the show ever kicked up into the high gear that it needed to really justify it being 5 hours long. And WrestleMania 35, you could argue the same thing, but at least I could say that I had a good time throughout the entire card. There were very little things on WrestleMania 35 that really made me pull my hair out, aside from maybe like the Miz match. But, I mean, I could forgive that. So, overall, I think WrestleMania 35 is the best of the bunch between these, modern, new era WrestleManias. But ever since WrestleMania 31, the shows have taken this longer route. WrestleMania 31 is the last 4-hour WrestleMania, and I think it shows that less is more, because I think WrestleMania 31 is an S-tier WrestleMania. I love this show. And when I watched it initially, and it's crazy to think, I was a senior in high school when it happened, which just, it's crazy how time is flying, but WrestleMania 31 is a phenomenal show. And the more I watch it, the more I love it. I love the first 3 matches. I think it's just such a consistent card. The ladder match was awesome. Rollins and Orton was awesome. I loved Sting and Triple H, even though the winner wasn't maybe wasn't the right call at that given moment, but it's still a great match. And honestly, my new favorite match on this card is the main event. I think Lesnar and Reigns had an awesome main event, and it's one of my personal favorites in WrestleMania history. All right, moving on. Let's do some. We were talking about some more moderns. Let's go back to some classics. WrestleMania 4. Look, I'm going to put WrestleMania 4 in D tier because, it is kind of fun. It's a tournament. Tournaments are kind of wacky and fun, especially, deep in classic WWF. But it's really not all that great of a show. The main event's cool, watching Macho Man win the title. But other than that, there really isn't much to write home about this show. Hogan and Andre 2 was cool, I guess, but nowhere near as big as Hogan and Andre 1. Speaking of which, Hogan and Andre 1 took place on WrestleMania 3, and I don't give a fuck what anyone says. This is going in S tier. WrestleMania 3 is simply too historic to not be anything but S tier. And before you're like, oh my god, it's a one-match show. Fuck that. Look, from a technical in-ring standpoint, it has one of the greatest matches of all time in Savage and Steamboat. But from like a business ass and seats standpoint, this has one of the greatest matches of all time in Hogan and Andre. Like this match, I'm sorry, the show has something for everyone. And I mean, it has a lot of fun matches too. Like that 6-man tag with the Hart Foundation and Danny Davis, like that was great. The Can-Am Connection opener was awesome. Honky Tonk Man and Jake Roberts, like how could you not love that match? And Piper's like quote unquote retirement match. Good times. Like I really like WrestleMania 3, so I'm putting it in S tier. I don't care. WrestleMania 2, fuck that. It's going in F tier. I don't like WrestleMania 2 at all. I think it's pretty shitty. The 3 different destinations, like that sounds cool on paper, but really poor in execution. And Susan St. James on commentary really didn't help it either. I kind of like the main event as like a guilty pleasure, and the tag title match is good, but other than that, everything else is pretty shitty. So speaking of shitty WrestleManias, I'll put WrestleMania 13 in D tier. This is saved because it has quite possibly the greatest match in WrestleMania history. It's argued, and there's very little reason to argue against it. Brett and Austin had an amazing match. But other than that, there really isn't a whole lot to write home about. WrestleMania 13 has that okay street fight, but the content of Sid's pants really sum up what I think of WrestleMania 13. All right, moving on. Let's see. Some other manias. WrestleMania 12. I'll put WrestleMania 12 in... If it can move. Okay, I don't mean to put it in C tier. I mean to put it in A tier. I actually really like WrestleMania 12. I think this show is pretty enjoyable for the most part. And I mean, majority of it's built around that Iron Man match. And, while it takes up a majority of the show, it's a good wrestling match. I know some people say it's overrated, it's too long, yada, yada, yada. But it's an hour long. They built up, for all these years, they were building up the pomp and circumstance and the celebrities. And WrestleMania 12, they finally decided to push wrestling. And they had their 2 best wrestlers go at it in an Iron Man match. It sounds like basic logic to me, and I thought it worked out well. So, and the undercard was fun too. I liked I liked Nash and Taker, and I like the 6-man tag opener. Like there's a lot of fun stuff on WrestleMania 12. All right, moving on. WrestleMania 11, the year prior to 12. All right, this is an F. This is probably the worst WrestleMania of all time. This felt like Sunday Night Raw in like the Hartford Civic Center. Yeah, that really screams WrestleMania. And it was crazy because they pushed all the celebrity angles, and you had LT wrestling in the main event, but they had to kind of shy away from the fact that the first 10 WrestleManias, with the exception of 10, I guess, the first 9 WrestleManias were dominated by Hulk Hogan. So they kind of were trying to stray away from that. And overall, it just had a bunch of shitty matches, a bunch of lackluster, title matches that honestly just really didn't deliver that much. So WrestleMania 11, I'm putting as one of the worst of all time. WrestleMania 23. I'm going to put this in A tier. I'm tempted to put B, but you know what? I'm going to say A just because, similar to WrestleMania 31, this is a really good card. It's just consistent throughout. I love the Money in the Bank ladder match. I love the title matches. Both Taker and Batista and Cena and Michaels are just great WrestleMania title matches. And the Battle of the Billionaires is a great moment. So I think there's a lot to enjoy in 23, even in some of the shitty matches. Like I know people hate on Kane versus Great Khali, but I do love the callback to the body slam with Hogan and Andre. So there's a lot to enjoy. But there's really not a lot to enjoy in WrestleMania 27, which I'll put in D tier. Now, part of me wants to put this in F tier just because I have like a vendetta against this WrestleMania. But I can't justify putting it in F tier because it's not horrible. I just don't think it was worth, the $50 or $60 that, was charged with it. I wasn't a fan of the undercard. I liked Triple H and Undertaker. It was by far the highlight of the night, but I really wasn't a fan of anything else. I didn't like Del Rio and Edge. I didn't like Punk and Orton, and I didn't really... Cody and Rey Mysterio was okay, but it really wasn't... It was like a SmackDown main event, which really doesn't cut it on WrestleMania. All right. WrestleMania 29, this one's kind of thrown around with 27, and I did attend this show, so I do have a little bit of bias, so I'm going to bump it up to C tier. In my youth, I probably would have put it in B tier, but I just don't think it deserves that when I look back on it. Rock and Cena 2 was just nowhere near as big as Rock and Cena 1. And same thing can be said with Brock and Triple H 2. You know what I mean? This is just the mania of rematches that no one really wanted to see. And the undercard is okay. Like, I like the Shield match. I actually really like the tag title match. I think that's a lot of fun despite it being really short. And Punk and Taker was really, really good. So it does have some good stuff on it. It's not it's not a horrible WrestleMania, but there really isn't a lot to be desired with WrestleMania 29. But WrestleMania 28, which had the original Rock and Cena match, I'm going to put this in A tier just because I think this WrestleMania was just a huge success. I remember I was a freshman when I was a freshman in high school when this WrestleMania happened, which just is crazy to think. But I was so excited for this WrestleMania, it wasn't even funny. And I think it was just because this was the first time I actually felt like there was a dream match in front of me. And aside from that, like, in my own smart mind, like CM Punk versus Chris Jericho was a dream match, so I just ate that match alive. And the Hell in a Cell match was awesome. Like, the first hour of this show was a little underwhelming, but I think, a good 80% of this show is kick-ass as opposed to 20%, which really isn't all that great. But I'll give WrestleMania 28 the A it deserves. WrestleMania 8, I'll put this in B tier. I think the first half of the show is really great. I like the opener with, HBK's first singles match at WrestleMania. And then, Randy Savage and Flair had an unbelievably great WWE title match. And Piper and Brett had a great Intercontinental title match. In a way, it's a lot like WrestleMania 21, which I'll also put in B tier. Both of these shows had insanely good undercard matches. And then it just kind of fell off a cliff. I don't really care too much for the John Cena JBL match or the Triple H Batista match, and the Sumo match was just dog shit. But I mean, WrestleMania 21's undercard was so fucking good. Like, Ray and Eddie, awesome. Money in the Bank, probably the best one we've ever seen. Randy Orton and Undertaker was great. And then Shawn Michaels and Kurt Angle had one of the best Mania matches ever. So I really don't have a lot to say bad about the undercard, but the main events, and again, the main events really drive your show. And if they suck, it's really going to leave a sour taste in your mouth. So I do like 21 and 8 for those undercard matches, but main events, not so much. 15, it does have a great main event. And even though it has a great main event, I cannot help but put it in F tier. I fucking hate this WrestleMania. It's classic Attitude Era overbooking. Like, the second best match aside from the main event is probably like Shane and X-Pac, but I really didn't care about Triple H and Kane. I think it was Sable. Was it Sable and Tori? They had like one of the worst matches ever. And then Big Boss Man gets hung from in the Hell in a Cell. So it's like, what more could you really ask for? WrestleMania 20, again, a lot of nostalgia for this pay-per-view, but I'm gonna put it in B. Yeah, I think B is a good place for WrestleMania 20. It's good. There's 12 matches on this card, and there's 4 that I absolutely adore. I love the 2 title matches. I love Jericho and Christian, and I love the Evolution Rock and Sock match. Everything else, not so much. And it's not like it's just forgettable. Like, you have some dog shit on this card. You have like the Playboy Evening Gown match, which sucked. You had Goldberg and Lesnar, which was one of the worst WrestleMania matches I have ever seen. John Cena and The Big Show had like a subpar opener, but hey, the crowd was into it. So, at the end of the day, who really cares? But WrestleMania 20, I think it's just too much of a mixed bag. And WrestleMania 10, while I also think is a mixed bag, has just so much going for it that I have to put it in A tier. WrestleMania 10 in my, dumb youth self said like, oh, it's too much of a mixed bag. Like, there's only like 2 matches that are really actually great. And it's like, look, those 2 matches that are great on this pay-per-view are fucking great. Owen and Brett is still today one of the greatest matches of all time. And the ladder match is it's like a paradox of itself. It's so innovative in that it laid the groundwork for future matches to come, but it was so great that it prevented all other future matches from ever topping it. It's just an amazing match, and it's crazy to even think like that. But those 2 matches are amazing, and I loved Brett winning the title at the end. His match with Yokozuna wasn't all that great, and the match Yoko had with Luger wasn't all that great, but I could forgive that for the epic title win. So I just think WrestleMania 10 has too much going for it to be anything less. WrestleMania 6, this is a good classic Mania that I think I'll put in B tier. This is one of those Manias that is built solely around the main event, and it's because you have your 2 top stars in the main event, and you have your 2 top champions in the main event. So you had to kind of fill the undercard with some filler, which I understand because, what else were you going to do? Your 2 top stars are facing each other. But anyway, this was a great babyface versus babyface match. I always get a kick out of Hogan kicking out at, 3 1/4. I absolutely love that. But, WrestleMania 6, I enjoy pretty much from start to finish, and I can get behind it any day. So let's see, WrestleMania 26, I'm going to put this in B tier as well. I have a lot of nostalgia for this show as well. This is one of those shows that I was really hyped for as a kid. It has Shawn Michaels' retirement match on it. So, what more could you really ask for? I use retirement in air quotes, and I never felt like I had to do that for Shawn Michaels, but I actually do. But, I did think the undercard was pretty good. I thought John Cena Batista was pretty good. I liked Jericho and Edge. I liked Triple H and Sheamus. I liked Punk and Mysterio. There was a lot of good stuff here. I mean, there was some bad, but again, good far outweighed the bad. Don't know if I can say the same thing for WrestleMania 18. And while I want to put it in D tier, I think it deserves C at the very most. I'm going to say C tier. I know my younger self hated Rock and Austin. Not Rock and Austin, I'm sorry. Rock and Hogan. But I think, the more I look back on it nowadays, it really actually is a great match because Hogan was able to hype that crowd up. Like, go back and watch him Hulk up against The Rock. The crowd is going absolutely apeshit. Like, it is the match of the night. It is the main event of that show. I do really appreciate Undertaker and Ric Flair, and I think an underrated Mania moment is Arn Anderson sneaking into the ring and giving the spine buster to the Undertaker. I think that's a great moment. But, overall, I enjoy it I enjoyed those two matches. But everything else, not too impressed with. WrestleMania 2000. So let's put this in D tier as well. I'm going to be a little bit more generous to this one than I am to 15. They both have the same problem of just like overbooking and just shoving too many people into one match. I do like the triangle ladder match, and I like the triple threat because of its interesting concept of the two falls with two different titles on the line. But again, there was just so much. I think there was only one singles match on this entire show, and the McMahon in every corner just seemed like just forcing the McMahons into the main event picture when they just didn't need to be there. And the main event angle was like how you would end an episode of Raw, not, WrestleMania, which is essentially, your series finale for the year of WWE. Damn, we only got 5 Manias left, and these are all pretty good ones. I'll put 25 in B tier. I know people would maybe knock this down a peg or two, but I actually really like WrestleMania 25. This has the problem of 21 and 8 where it's like the undercard was actually pretty good up until, HBK and Taker, barring a couple exceptions like the Miss WrestleMania Battle Royal. But, I thought the triple threat with Cena, Big Show, and Edge was okay. And the main event, I mean, it's not a horrible match. It's just not WrestleMania main event worthy. All right, and I'm looking at these final 4 Manias, and I don't know. I think I'm okay, so WrestleMania 14, I would say is S tier. Maybe it's A tier. It might be like the peak of A tier. It's not an S tier show. I don't think. I'm looking back on my thoughts on WrestleMania 14. I'm going to put it in A. I'm going to give it like a really high A tier. Like on the border between A and S. I think the Tyson being in the main event was great. I liked the main event matches. Kane, Undertaker was great. HBK and Austin was great. You got some really underrated gems on this card. I liked the tag title match. I liked the light heavyweight title match. Owen and Triple H had a really underrated WrestleMania main event. But, I think it was just a very, very great WrestleMania. I don't know if it's S tier worthy. But 24, I would say, is S tier worthy. I think this is like one of the best Manias of all time. Consistent card throughout. Aside from like Bunny Mania and maybe Batista and Umaga, this WrestleMania card is phenomenal. I like the 2 title matches. I really love the triple threat on this show, even though it's Cena, Orton, and Triple H in 2008. It was still awesome, and I really loved it. And I really think they pulled together a really fun WrestleMania match that gets overlooked quite often. But, Money in the Bank was good, and Flair and HBK had like a great, great match that was, driven off of emotion. And I mean, just quality-wise, WrestleMania 24 just blows so many other Manias out of the water. And 30 is a show they booked not really to be, great 5-star quality match-wise, but just on moments. And because of that, I would put it in S tier. They were building this as a celebration of WrestleMania moments, and I think they succeeded in spades. The opening segment was a memorable moment. Daniel Bryan beating Triple H and then winning the title was a memorable moment. Even Cesaro body slamming the Big Show was awesome. And then Undertaker losing his streak. They booked this show in such a way that they really delivered on what they promised. So for that, I will give WrestleMania 30 S tier quality without a doubt. And WrestleMania 19, I really didn't mean to save this show for last, but it just ended up being that way. I will put this in S tier as well. This is my personal favorite WrestleMania. I just think this is... WrestleMania 17 has that match for everyone, but I think WrestleMania 19 is like the wrestling fans' WrestleMania. I just think there's so many great I should say the WWE fans WrestleMania. There's just so many great things to love about this. I love the Hogan McMahon street fight. You know, I do like Booker T and Triple H. I know the finish, but whatever. The main event's awesome. The undercard is a lot of fun. I really, really enjoy the undercard. I love the Cruiserweight title match, and I love all of Taz's sexual innuendos on commentary. They're hilarious. And it has one of my personal favorite matches of all time with Shawn Michaels and Chris Jericho. And the baseball stadium aesthetic, it was just all really, really cool. And I really love WrestleMania 19. But there you have it. There's your WrestleMania tier list. I didn't really put these in any specific order. It's not like this is like the definitive ranking of WrestleManias, but I do think I would say this is a very fair assessment for tiers. I mean, I'm sure you guys might disagree on certain ones, but, you know, this is just what I think. But there it is. There is your WrestleMania tier list, and I'm glad you guys stuck with me for all this time. But my name is Jerichoholic8704. I'll see all of you guys later.